Hi, and welcome back to Continual. I'm your host, Jim Nettles, and tonight we're going again to that place far, far away, or not so far away, depending on which bit of lore you go to. We are going to be talking all about Star Wars tie-ins and all the fun stuff that this crowd happens to love. So let's go around and see who is coming in to hop in, and, well, we're going to start with our retired ISB officer, one and only Jack. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Jack Cullen. I write Locke Ferguson versus the Aliens, a sci-fi comedy, and Recollections of Rune Knight, which is a urban fantasy series about a police department.
Dennis?
Hi, I'm Dennis Myers. I write science fiction in the far future. My series, Rise of the Automated Empire, is available on Amazon, and I'm still writing, so there's more coming.
Wayland?
I write under the name Wayland Smith. I call myself a multi-genre author. Well, I usually call myself pan-authorial because it's funnier. But I've got stuff coming out all over the place, and I should have 3 more coming out this year, including the 3rd book in my Wild Side series about superhuman mercenaries.
And Wendy.
Hi, I'm Wendy Van Camp. I am what is known as a speculative poet, which means I write poetry with themes of science fiction and fantasy, just like science fiction and fantasy authors do. I am an editor, I'm a writing coach, and I am a former poet laureate from the city of Anaheim, California.
So we are all authors of a certain age, so I'm going to go around. I remember seeing Star Wars in the theater as a young kid myself for the first time. And that whole, just the music hits. I will openly say the first thing that got to my little kid OCD was, why are we starting at episode 4? I still remember that to this day. It still disturbs my inner peace. But Jack, where'd you get your first taste of Star Wars at?
The very first movie, opening weekend. I'm not going to call it episode 4, Star Wars. That's what it was when it came out. That's what it's still in my mind. But, I saw it opening weekend with a bunch of friends, and that was it. I was hooked forever.
Dennis?
Yeah, same thing. It wasn't opening weekend, but it was shortly after. My grandmother grabbed my 2 brothers and I. My brothers were much younger. But I was 14, and she took us to the theater. I found 2 lovely young ladies who let me sit between them, and I was more interested in them than the movie, right until, the first, as the ship is coming over, the ship's coming, and it's like, the ship is coming, and then the ship is coming. It's like, holy crap. And then I got into the movie, and, but yeah, the very first movie. And by the time the second movie came out, Empire Strikes Back, I was actually working in the theater. So I saw it, twice a night for 2 weeks running.
Wayland?
Also in the movie theater, like the other esteemed panelists. It was not opening weekend, but I think partially because she was glad to get me out of the house, my mom took me to that and occasionally dropped me off something like 20 times that summer. It might have been 22.
Wendy?
Well, I was a kid, and of course, no access to the movies unless my parents took me. So they bundled us all up into the car, and we went to the drive-in, and it just gobsmacked me. And I
that
think
must have been amazing in the drive-in.
Yeah, it was fun. It was fun. Huge screen and all that. But for me, as a young person who was just getting into filmmaking, the filmmaking style is what really grabbed me. The way the visuals told the story in a way I'd never seen before. And it's probably the main reason that propelled me into becoming a television film major in college, and later on becoming a television producer director in the Hollywood area. I love Star Wars. I love all of it about it. And I'm so glad to be on this panel because it's one of my favorite topics.
Well, so often all the love goes to, the first 3 films. Then we kind of tolerate the second 3 films, and then there are the lost 3 films. But beyond that, there's a tremendous amount else to the universe. We have a ton of TV shows. We can talk about varying degrees of quality, but we've got a ton of TV shows. I remember when we were promised Star Wars TV show in the 80s that never came about because I just don't think they could have pulled it off. Other than, of course, the beloved, well-produced, extraordinary storytelling of the Life Day episode, the Life Day show. But we'll be kind this time. I still have a great love of that thing just to watch the torment that it inflicts upon everyone else. But so let's talk a lot about the other pieces of the Star Wars universe. In fact, I just got done watching Andor Season 2 last night, wrapping up the last episode of that. So let's talk. Let's start talking about some of the animated stuff. I mean, Clone Wars, I think, set a lot and told us a tremendous deal just about the greater universe itself. And so, Dennis, I'll start with you on that. On Clone Wars.
I loved Clone Wars when it first started. That new character with the blue dangly things that was the Padawan for Anakin just was kind of annoying and off-putting. And watching her grow into the central character of the series and falling in love with her along the way was such a brilliant piece of writing. And Ahsoka Tano getting her own series was amazing. But I'll tell you, as I moved on to Rebels and started watching Rebels, spoiler alert, when she showed up in Rebels as an adult, I cheered. I was just so freaking happy to see her later in her life, that they've, grown her. For me, yeah, Clone Wars, Rebels, and The Bad Batch are my three favorites. I wasn't such a fan of Resistance, but it was more because I didn't like the animation style. And I've only seen a few of the new Jedi Adventures. They're just too young for me. But have you guys watched Visions? I love Visions. That stuff is amazing too.
I think I saw the first season of that, but yeah. So, Wayland, what about you since we've kind of stretched it in the animated series?
Pretty much what Dennis said. Clone Wars and Rebels were brilliant. I love getting to see Ahsoka come back again in Rebels. I've only seen a few of The Bad Batch. I'm working my way through it, but what I've seen so far, I've really enjoyed. And I think animation is a great way to tell Star Wars stories, because let's face it, doing that stuff live action ain't cheap.
Yeah.
And animation is a wonderful way around ridiculous effects budgets. That's one of the reasons that I'm hearing rumors about the next Dresden Files video thing might be animated. But for Star Wars, I think it's a phenomenal choice with the right voice actors and the right writing, and they've had that, in my opinion. I've absolutely loved watching that stuff. It's been great. And then watching first as cosplayers doing the stuff in live action, and then actual TV shows as stuff went. I will never forget the first time I saw Harrison Dula in a cosplay, one of the cons I was at. I was like, wow, that's amazing. And just watching this stuff grow has been fantastic.
Wendy?
Well, I think Clone Wars is what kind of got me into Star Wars as a series. Love Ahsoka Tano, as Dennis said. But I really loved Matt Latner's portrayal. Never mind. I'm having one of those moments. But anyway, I love the way he showcased Anakin Skywalker. And, in the prequels, he seemed kind of young and whiny and whatnot. Although I love Hayden Christensen, don't get me wrong. He's matured into a wonderful actor. And I love his current portrayal of Anakin Skywalker as a Force ghost and all that. But I really liked how Matt kind of fleshed out the character, made him seem a little more adult. The stories showed a little bit more of his relationship with Padme. And the dialogue, of course, was so much better than what we got in the prequel movies. So I really love the Clone Wars for that. And in fact, my first Star Wars poem that I wrote was inspired by the Clone Wars. It's called He Is Your Brother.
Jack, how about for you?
I thought Clone Wars was great. I held off watching it for a while. I had a bunch of friends that kept pestering me to watch it. I finally watched it. It was one of those, why haven't I seen this before? And I had nobody to blame but myself. Um, there's so much to unpack with Clone Wars. You guys covered a lot of it. Let's stick with two things. One, I served in the military. I was a soldier. The later seasons where they focused more on the clones, which then went off with Bad Batch, they do a great job. It's, everything was always kind of like Jedi focused. And now you got the grunts, you got the soldiers, the ones who got to do the missions. The fact that they were clones, they don't really have their own freedom. The writing on this was phenomenal. The voice actors were phenomenal. They really, really made it so good. And it went off in this other direction where it's like, all right, these are the people that in the movies they were just cannon fodder. We never really paid attention to them, but they were people with dreams, aspirations, and they had to fight in this war, and they never got a choice in the matter. I also thought the Clone Wars made the prequels bearable. It's what the prequels should have been and weren't. I gotta argue with Wendy there. I'm not a fan of Hayden. I thought his acting in those movies was very stilted. I mean, the dialogue didn't help. It definitely hindered. I thought there was no real spark between the actor and the actress, and I think that hurt. So I found that the prequels, and I know a lot of people our age were like, "Oh, the prequel's bad, change is bad." But I thought a lot of those movies, that were stilted. It wasn't well executed. The Clone Wars brought those movies to life, because once you watch the Clone Wars, you can go back and watch those movies, and now you know what's going on behind the scenes because you've seen it in Clone Wars. Now they're better. Are they good? Yeah, I wouldn't say that, but they're definitely better than what they were before the Clone Wars came out.
Yeah.
So I want to throw a piece in here because, again, all being writers, all loving story and storytelling, and the fact that that really is the key to even some of the things that could have been done better, have all had aspects of story and things that carried through to the universe. Even as we look at some of the pieces that have not always worked, but there's still a lot of power in that story. And I mean, again, I think there's some of this we deal with, which is, generational, the things that we know, right? It's where do we get our start? But I want to stick kind of those animated series because I loved the Bad Batch. I thought that was just a fun series. There was nothing wasted in there. You were never sitting and kind of waiting, even as they built some of the bigger arcs and things like that. So just across, Clone Wars, Rebels, Bad Batch, is there a particular story arc that just grabbed you and told you so much more about the greater universe? And so, Wayland, I'm going to go to you for that one first.
You would start with me on that.
Of course.
I cannot remember one specifically. It's been a while since I saw Clone Wars or Rebels. But actually, I think I'll probably go with most of Rebels, because one of the things that was different about Rebels is the entire story pretty much was on a little backwater planet, the sort of thing that you would definitely not see in the movies, but it was a different slice of life about this is what it's like under the Empire. And the whole way they built up, this is how a planet gets to the point of going to rebellion, and the build they did of making them slowly more integrated with the rest of the rebellion, I think was really, really well done.
Wendy, how about for you? What's an arc that just really told you something you had not looked at that way before?
I think the story that grabbed me in the Clone Wars was the Mortis arc, because during the original 3 films, 4, 5, and 6, just to clarify, they always kept saying that Anakin Skywalker was the chosen one, that he would bring balance to the Force. And throughout the movie, I was going, well, how did he do that? And I had to listen to people explain it outside of the movie to kind of get a sense of what that actually was. And I'm of the firm opinion, as a filmmaker and writer, that the story that you present has to explain it. You shouldn't have to come afterwards and say that. So when I saw the Mortis story, with this idea that the balance of the Force is between these three godlike people, and that Anakin may be slated to replace one day, or at least that was what that particular episode was about. I went, oh, maybe that is the balance of the Force, and maybe this is someone that has to experience both sides, the light and the dark, to bring that balance to fruition. And so that really caught my attention, and it also helped me understand what the Force was about as just a person watching the television episodes and series. And when we got into Rebels, we got a little bit more explanation with Kanan's instruction of Ezra. And Ezra had a lot of different abilities than Luke Skywalker did or Anakin did. And so it really helped me see what more the Force might be. And then, of course, we have Ahsoka, who in the end rejects the Jedi Order and walks away. But again, she has certain abilities and connections with the Force that it really made things even more in depth. But for me anyway, it all started with that Mortis arc, which I'm very happy to see is continuing in the Ahsoka series.
Jack?
I'm going to include Bad Batch in a little bit with the clones, where I thought they did a great way of showing the different planets and the different races, and part of this is because it's animation. I mean, let's face it, the original 3 movies, Ahsoka would have been tough to do just for, special effects. Not a problem with animation. I thought they did a great job of when they hit a planet, when they're fighting on a planet, you had glimpses, sometimes a lot more, sometimes just a little, of the native races. They actually showed characters that were part of the separation movement, which in the movies, in the prequels, they were just kind of like the bad guys. Here, they filled it out more. We want to be separate because of this. We don't want oversight. It made them more three-dimensional, and it kind of showed that, they're not just the faceless enemy. I use the word cartoon, even though it was, it was animation. They weren't cartoony villains. They were people with legitimate gripes that were on the other side. Were they necessarily good guys? No, but neither was the other side. They portrayed it as war actually is. It's messy. There's good people on both sides. There's bad people on both sides. It just depends on, what's going on. And as we all know, it turned out both sides were fooled. But, they did, they fleshed out the Mandalorians, right? We saw Mandalore for the first time. By the way, Mandalorian shirt. So we get to see them a lot more. We get to see, I can't think of the race, but the one with the hive, with the wings. We get to see their planet.
The Genosians.
Genosians, thank you. We get to see more of their race. We get to see the fact that, they had catacombs and their hierarchy on their races. I thought the Clone Wars, and then later Bad Batch, because Bad Batch has, the more seedy side of the universe because they're hiding. So they're going into, more of the outlaw area. I thought they both did a phenomenal job fleshing out the Star Wars universe.
Dennis?
For me, it started with episode 3, the Revenge of the Sith, where one wrinkly old guy issues a single order, Order 66. Now, in the military, in real life, general orders are something that you read, you memorize, and you know them. When Order 66 went, they all knew what that meant, and they just went to work. I found it very difficult to believe that these people who were fighting alongside the Jedi, who were friends and who were in the trenches with the Jedi, would know that there's an order on the books to kill the Jedi and not say anything. And so that it didn't sit right. But the Clone Wars came in and said, no, they didn't know about Order 66. Order 66 was a trigger for a chip in their head. And that whole storyline about the inhibitor chips being installed to get this going, and the fact that once in a while they malfunction, that was awesome. but also that clones could take them out. Or in the Bad Batch, some of them didn't have the chips. So that whole thing made episode 3 much more palatable to me.
Well, and there's two particular ones for me, I think, that were really formative. And Wendy hinted at one, which is, of course, Ahsoka's being falsely accused and thrown out of the Jedi. And they're like, our bad, come on back. And she's like, no. And that moment and that look of, you got to sometimes do what you feel is right. And to look at how that was politically handled, I think, told a lot about where the Jedi Order was at that particular point, and showed kind of the degradation and corruption that led to why the Empire was allowed to rise. But the other one for me that really hit hard was there's a very particular episode where Yoda's got to go confront his dark side. He's got to go confront his shadow self. And to see going through kind of the classical stages of confronting one's shadow self and the notion that somebody could be this great master, 900 years old, have seen all of this history and still not have dealt with all of that, I think was another thing as well, to see that, what do you expect out of this poor guy that is only going to live 80 years maybe, or 100 years, versus Yoda that's been plodding around for that long, and seeing that level of inner conflict and things that had been unresolved. And I mean, those two things for me, I think, showed us a lot about why the Order was where it was at, because you're seeing the most senior leadership making some really stupid choices and still not dealing with their own personal issues, to the point where I think that tells us how they got there. So with that notion, let's hop out of the animated series. Let's talk about some of the Disney shows. So I'm going to let you guys come in, and, which one so far has been your number one, right? What's your top show, and what is it about that in the universe that really has set an anchor for you? So, Wendy?
I would say that would have to be Ahsoka for me, just because I'm such a fan of the Clone Wars and Rebels. It's just the natural progression, but it's also tying in aspects of The Mandalorian, which I also enjoy. So for me, it's just, I can't wait for the next season kind of thing. And also, like I said, Hayden Christensen is reprising his role as Anakin Skywalker. And it's like totally new. I mean, he's just has so much depth and emotion. My heart palpitates a little bit. He's still very handsome. And although for you guys, maybe that's not a factor. But I just really love Ahsoka. And I think the stories are decent. I think they could be a little bit tweaked better. They're not quite at the standard of Clone Wars, but they're close enough that I really have been enjoying that live action series.
Jack?
I honestly have enjoyed them all of them. Every single one I've been able to find something to pull out that I've enjoyed. Of course, being a typical Star Wars fan, I've also found something to complain about every single one as well. But I got to go with The Mandalorian. I absolutely love that show. I grew up watching Westerns, reruns of Westerns, the Rifleman thing, Have Gun Will Travel. Loved that with what they did with The Mandalorian. And, it fleshed out this race that between the books, fandom, the movies, was kind of a mess, right? We had, all right, well, they're this way. Well, no, then there's the whole pacifist movement. And then there's the, they hunt Jedi. And what they were able to kind of say, hey, you know what? All this works, but this is why. And I mean, how often are you rooting for a character who grew up in a cult? But I mean, it worked. The fact that they used 3 people to play the Mandalorian, right? You've got Pedro Pascal doing the acting. You get John Wayne's grandson doing the guns. You get the other guy whose name escapes me at the moment doing the physical fighting thing.
Lateef Crowder.
Thank you. They nailed it. And part of it is, the two people who really put this together grew up as Star Wars fans. And, how often do you see someone's making a movie about a book or, a remake and the director's like, well, I've never seen the original. It's like, these are two guys who basically, were right there on either side of us with the popcorn growing up watching this stuff. And they never lost that. And you can see it in that series. You can see it in a lot of the series. There's a lot of Star Wars fans that are involved in the Disney series, but The Mandalorian's really where it shines. They nailed it with Grogu. It's phenomenal. In my opinion, it is the best out of all the Star Wars. And I know those are fight words, but that's my particular opinion.
Dennis?
Again, I love all of them. I found something that I really enjoyed in every single series, especially in The Mandalorian with the number one marketing character ever invented of Grogu. But for me, it's Andor. Andor gives us a gritty, down-to-earth show about how a rebellion starts and how a rebellion is not nice and it is not fun. And it was a good, solid story. And season 2, I wish it hadn't been quite so abbreviated, but I enjoyed it quite a bit. And at the end, after the last show, I went ahead and watched Rogue One again. And that it hits differently. It does. And I absolutely enjoyed the whole thing. So yeah, for me it's Andor.
Wayland, how about for you?
I'm going to go in a slightly different direction. I too have enjoyed all the live action I've seen. I think they've all been brilliant. There's been great stuff about all of them, but I'm actually going to say the Book of Boba Fett for 3 reasons. First of all, Boba Fett, he's just a phenomenally cool character. Second of all, the one episode of Timothy Oliphant as a marshal, they took Justified and they moved it to the Star Wars universe, and it worked beautifully well, and I love seeing Timothy Oliphant in that kind of a role, and I thought he did phenomenally with it, and I would desperately love to see more of that character. And then the incredible Ming-Na Wen. I mean, anything she's in, I'm going to watch, and she did great in that as well. So that I loved them all, but I may put that first for those 3 reasons.
I actually really enjoyed those colorful bikers. I thought that's exactly what would happen on Tatooine.
Yeah.
Everything is sand-colored, everything is dull, everything is drab, and the kids are going to go, oh, fuck no, I want bright red and blue.
Yeah.
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 We want bright red, mopeds.
Yes.
I will tell you the last episode of that.
My biggest problem with that series is they wouldn't let Boba Fett be Boba Fett.
Yeah.
They could have titled that series Boba Fett, Get Off My Lawn. They didn't let him be him. He's a scary dude. My favorite character growing up, right? He just stood around and looked menacing and scared the hell out of everybody. It said he was like every 5 seconds he was asking, you know who I am? I'm Boba Fett. It kind of took away from it. Everything else that Wayland said kind of saved that series, but how they wrote Boba, and it's not the fault of the actor, kind of hurt that, in my opinion.
Yeah,
the other thing
I didn't like it either. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to do, but it was the fact that he was like living in his memories all the time and wasn't in the present. And the few times he was in the present, he didn't do anything. And I actually only liked the Boba Fett series when they shifted into the Mandalorian storyline and had Luke Skywalker there. And then I perked up. But the other things, it was a real slog to watch, unfortunately.
I thought
like Boba Fett character.
Sorry. I thought Boba Fett in The Mandalorian was awesome. Boba Fett in Boba Fett, the Book of Boba Fett, not so much.
I also thought that having 2 entire episodes of a 6-episode series, not about the main character, but about the Mandalorian,
That was
messed up.
that was a save attempt.
Fair.
Nah, that was messed up because they had to write and do that before there was any audience response, and yeah, they tried to have Boba do something that he wasn't really meant to be doing.
Yeah.
My only other gripe is at some point somebody should have mentioned that Cad Bane was looking very pale. He must be getting old.
Well, so Book of Boba Fett, I liked the first couple of episodes with Boba being stripped down to nothing, right? Getting out of the Sarlacc pit, getting kidnapped, or losing his armor, basically being hauled off, and having to rebuild from there. I enjoyed that. I thought that was fun and interesting. The notion of coming into town. Okay, I'm going to be the new bad gangster. I'm taking over town. I'm like, all right, let's go. And then it was like, okay, I'm now the new bad gangster, and
yeah, I think if they had done it more of him conquering his territory instead of
he'd had to fight for it a little more.
Yeah, exactly. And they could have used 2 more episodes to do that.
Yeah. Well, I think some of that again goes back to the timing of when that was being filmed as well. So I kind of want to spend a little bit more time. So the Mandoverse is largely, in many ways, the most big successful piece of it, right? If you kind of count how Ahsoka's woven in, if you count how Book of Boba Fett's woven in, you've got this bigger, larger story, and now we're headed towards the collision of where all these things have been going on, and really this is everything in that kind of that New Order period, where we're seeing okay, great, we had a rebellion, we won, we have no idea what the hell we're doing anymore, right? And we get to see this level of disorder spreading through the galaxy with everything we've seen so far. Now I am looking forward, spoilers ahead, to seeing what happens when Thrawn comes back to this side of the galaxy, right? I mean, this is one of those things I've been waiting to see is, what does a little older, little crazier Thrawn, who's been stuck on the other side with nothing but a bunch of zombies, do when he gets back?
Backed up by awesome witches.
Yes. And I mean, I loved seeing the Dathomir witches. Is that right? Dathomir witches. Loved seeing that in live action. I thought that was a lot of fun to go and see that and how they portrayed that versus Clone Wars, what we saw there. So, Jack, I'm going to hop to you on this one again. So, with everything we've seen in kind of that greater Mandoverse, where do you think that this is headed? We know that it's all headed towards the big final film, but
yeah, that's a good credit. I do got to point out for the witches, the fact that they grabbed Claudia Black is awesome. She's phenomenal, and she's perfect for that. It's going to be interesting because I hope they resist the temptation to stuff every possible character in the Mando universe into this, because it's going to take away from the majority of the characters, and we've seen it before. So I love the idea of Thrawn. Finally, actually seeing him on the screen was awesome. I can't think of his name. Oh God, the kid that was trapped with him. I'm blanking.
Ezra.
Thank you, Ezra Bridger. Thank you. I didn't like that whole, forced kung fu thing he was doing. I don't need a lightsaber. I hope they kind of throw that aside. I'd like to see him and Ahsoka and Sabine be more the focus for the Thrawn plot line. I'd like to see Mando kind of stay doing his own thing. I don't want to see him thrown into that. This has the potential to be really, really good, and it also has the potential to get really screwed up. So I'm very worriedly optimistic.
Hoping that Kathleen Kennedy goes away before then. Dennis, how about you?
I was going to shout out to Claudia Black too. I do have to disagree with Jack. I think the idea of what does a Jedi with no real formal training who doesn't have a lightsaber do when he's stranded for years, not able to make a lightsaber, and his practice and able to use the Force to push and pull. I mean, that goes back to Darth Vader pulling things down on his son when they were doing their battle. Having him refine that skill and show us something new that a Jedi can do, that actually made me really happy because I like seeing when Jedis can do something new, but it still makes sense. As opposed to something like Force healing, which literally came out of nowhere. Just saying.
Well, that actually came out of the books, and actually, I think also out of the game series.
Yep.
So, what was the question again?
Bigger Mandoverse, right? You know, what's worked for you? Where are you hoping for things to go? What do you want to see?
My biggest regret is that some bigwig has decided that they need to go back to movies and get people in theaters because somehow that makes them more money. A movie is only 2 hours long. That's 2 frickin' episodes. You know, and what they have done with The Mandalorian with their seasons, even when it's like 8 or 9 episodes, that's still so much more story, so much more opportunity to expand on characters, and I've really gotten used to that style of storytelling. So while I'm thrilled that Mandalorian and Grogu are coming out in theaters, I'm still going to wait for it to come out on Disney Plus and watch it at home because I don't do theaters anymore. And it's just going to be 2 episodes for me. So, you know, although I have to admit, when they announced, you know, Starfighter, I thought that was pretty cool. I have no idea what they're going to do, but Ryan Gosling in, you know,
I'm so hoping they adapt some of the Rogue Squadron books because those were so brilliantly done.
You know, I'm disappointed that Rogue Squadron didn't actually get greenlit and go through because, you know, I know Michael Stackpole and he's a great guy.
Me too.
And they actually talked.
And I knew Aaron Alston before he passed.
Yeah.
Huh?
Aaron Alston
also before he passed.
So yeah, I'm looking forward to it always, but I wish they wouldn't give up on the streaming services and longer form storytelling because there's so many stories that they can tell.
Wayland, how about for you? What do you want to get out of the Mandoverse?
Honestly, you know, as long as it's a really good story, I don't really care what format it's in. I do like the series at home because there's more content, as Dennis said, but I've always loved the movies. And honestly, seeing Star Wars back when I was like 7 or whatever it was, helped cement that for me further. You give me a dark screen, a big screen in a dark room with a popcorn, and I'm a really, really happy guy. I don't really care what format it takes. There are so many stories that could still work through that universe. They could definitely go beyond this movie if they choose to. I would love to see some more advancement from Grogu. And aside from that, just like Jack was saying, they didn't let Boba Fett be Boba Fett in the series. Let the Mando be the Mando for this movie and just point him at something and watch him go.
Mm-hmm.
Wendy?
Well, I love The Mandalorian too, and I loved Grogu. I mean, hands down, he's been one of my favorite new characters. And I'm really hoping to see him don a helmet and become the first Mandalorian Jedi in many generations and seeing what he does. I mean, just seeing him catch a glimpse of the mythosaur makes me wonder about many things that I'm looking forward to. Hopefully they will come into the movies. But I really felt that The Mandalorian started to stray toward the end. It wasn't really about Mando and Grogu as it was from the beginning. It became more Bo-Katan's story. And I really felt that kind of took away from the original glamour of The Mandalorian, that Western feel and the Wild West kind of feel that they were generating with that, but of course on a more galactic scale. I'd actually love to see them return more to similar adventures where they're doing heists and doing this kind of thing, and watching Grogu develop as a force wielder and as a Mandalorian, and learning the culture and becoming part of this family in a sense, and see how he grows. Because in the end, I think the title The Mandalorian is not actually Mando's title. It's actually Grogu from the very beginning. He is the Mandalorian. He will become the Mandalorian Jedi or Force wielder or whatever, and probably will be the one leading at the very end. At least that's where I see him going. I could be wrong. But it's been a wonderful series. I'm just hoping it doesn't stall because they are turning it into a movie. I would have rather have seen another season instead of the film. I'm looking forward to the film, don't get me wrong, but I think seeing a series and watching Mando and Grogu continue their bond and learning would have been much more fun.
So the one series I think we need to bring in here, because there's still a number of them we haven't touched on, but the one that I know I've been waiting for since I was a kid was to see Obi-Wan, right? So Dennis, I'm gonna throw this to you. How did you feel about the Obi-Wan series and the fact it's not getting a second season?
Well, the fact that it's not getting a second season is incredibly short-sighted. But then again, they're executives and they think with their pocketbooks. The story of Obi-Wan in exile is such a sad and interesting journey that he goes on. And what we get to see is him before he settles into that role. He's not comfortable there. He's disconnected from the Force. And he's really in a bad place. And I enjoy that so much because it shows character growth. It shows, what happens to a person who loses everything. And he did. He lost everything. I liked that. I thought the little girl who played Leia was brilliant. And the fact that he's going as Ben now, that makes sense. And that she wouldn't connect the two in the first show. She was young. That's, such a long time ago. That makes sense. So it really worked well. I do wish that they would have gone further. But for what it was a really good series.
What about you, Wayland?
The fact that it's not getting a second season is a remarkably foolish choice, as Dennis said. I don't get it. I think Ewan McGregor does a phenomenal job of Kenobi. The story is great. There's a solo Kenobi novel by who is it? John Jackson Miller.
Yeah.
Which I've got and I've read because I have pretty much all the Star Wars novels. Which tells a lot more about his time in exile, and it's such a great period, and there's so many things you could do, and I don't get why they don't want to tap into that, but they do seem to be allergic to the novels for whatever reason. But yeah, I thought it was great. I would love to see more of it. I agree that the young actress who played Leia was phenomenal, and just seeing him trying to keep his head down, trying to get his work done, and knowing all the while that he could make such a huge difference if he let himself. And the constant ongoing conflict of, I could fix this, I'm not going to. It's just, there's so much storytelling you could do there.
Well, and also seeing a lot of the nascent levels of the rebellion from that story too.
Yeah.
Mm.
I mean, there was, I think that was where we got to see a lot of that kind of nascent things happening, and that was another thing to me that was interesting, was seeing those aspects to it. Even though I think timeline-wise it's a little off from what we see from Andor, but so Wendy, how about for you and Obi-Wan?
Well, I love Ewan McGregor as Kenobi, and I am disappointed there won't be a second season to the show. I really felt that I would have liked to seen a little more of Kenobi interacting with Luke Skywalker, because that's the reason he's on the planet, right? And instead they put time into characters that didn't really resonate with me. I did love the little actress that played Leia. She's very powerful at such a young age. I suspect we'll be seeing more of her as she grows older. I don't see her leaving the stage anytime soon. I did like the story that was developed with her, and that it gave reasons why she maybe knew of Obi-Wan, and why maybe in the New Hope she called on him, because of this interaction that she had with Kenobi at a young age. And in the season 2, I could very well see him going off planet to do something with her again. It's just, I kind of wished they had a little more to do with Luke Skywalker too. I mean, they are twins. Maybe they don't need to have completely equal time, but I would have liked to see just a little bit more with him as well, and just some interaction, because he obviously knew Ben Kenobi from a young age, and in the series, it was almost hands off and very hostile, and I don't know if I agreed with that, but then again, that's storytelling, and if there would be more coming, then that would make more sense. But evidently there isn't. We just unfortunately have to face the fact that Disney is not in a great financial situation right now. And we are probably going to lose a lot of stories that we might have gotten had they been doing a little better. But we'll see what happens, we don't all know the future. And Star Wars is such a great property. I mean, even if Disney doesn't continue with it, somebody hopefully will pick it up and do it right for us.
Actually, if I could just say something real quick, I also just watched A New Hope, and in those scenes with Uncle Ben, what I had totally forgotten was how hostile Uncle Ben was to Obi-Wan. So now
Owen.
that makes
Uncle
a lot
Owen.
more
Uncle Owen.
Uncle Owen.
Uncle Ben's the rice.
Uncle Owen. Sorry.
Yeah, Uncle Ben, that's Spider-Man.
okay.
That's wrong.
I'm old.
That too. Yeah.
Yeah, he always was in the.
Yeah.
And I the thing is, though, what was the story reason for the hostility? I mean, when we saw him in the movies, Ben Kenobi brings the baby to them, and
because I think Uncle Owen knows
who
Darth Vader is.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I was going to address that. I think it makes perfect sense. You've got, okay, here you go. Here's the kid. Even if he doesn't know who Darth Vader is, he knows what happened to Anakin, right? Anakin went off, died. All right, now we're raising him. We don't want him to fall in his father's footsteps and die fighting this in Owens, because remember, he's a farmer. He's dealing with day-to-day stuff. He doesn't care about politics. It's a fool's errand, he doesn't care, forget the Empire, forget the Republic. We're going to be here doing our thing. We got to deal with the Hutts. I don't want him going off on a fool's errand and getting himself killed. Kenobi's keeping an eye on him, but I want Kenobi away from him because I want him filling his mind full of nonsense. It makes sense because, he's his uncle, but let's face it, him and his wife are Luke's surrogate parents.
Yeah.
Luke's their kid. They want to protect him. So, let's keep the, laser sword wielding hobo away from him. And, and maybe someday he'll inherit.
Such a great description.
Well, I'll accept your explanation. That makes sense, the way you said.
I also thought they did a great job regarding Leia, because there was nothing there that contradicted the first movie. Right? I mean, there was a lot going on in the first movie. She could have remembered, Obi-Wan Kenobi. I mean, she did mention, you fought for my father in the Clone Wars, blah, blah, blah. Doesn't mean she didn't know who he was, but at this point, even at 18, she's, a skilled diplomat, skilled spy. She can compartmentalize. I thought it went really good. It also explains, there's two things that Kenobi explained. One, why Obi-Wan Kenobi aged so much in 18 years.
Yeah.
And two, why she named her kid Ben. Because if she didn't know who he was, she named her kid after a guy who she spent, like a week with, tops. Mm-hmm. So this makes it more sense. I was going to chime in with everything everyone else said. The actress that played young Leia was phenomenal. She did a great job. But yeah, I mean, this was kind of a bleak series. It kind of hurt me to see Obi-Wan, who's such a great character, going through that. But it made sense, and it really fleshed out the character. And I thought it was a great series.
So I want to make sure
Blair is her name, apparently, since we keep not knowing what it is.
No.
Vivian Blair is the young actress who played Leia.
Yeah.
I get curious and looked it up.
In my head canon, Leia does not know that Ben is Obi-Wan Kenobi until somewhere along the line, Luke lets her know. That's when she has the epiphany. Oh my God, the old man I saw die was Obi-Wan Kenobi. She heard Luke call Ben.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've always wanted to see like a bunch of background characters with the last name Kenobi, and we find out it's the equivalent of Smith in the Star Wars universe. Because I'm undercover, but I'm going to use my same last name, and I'm still going to wear my Jedi robes. Just never made sense to me.
Did you guys ever see Troops?
Yeah. Yes.
See what?
Troops?
Troops, yes. Yeah. Long time ago.
So I want to hit on, we at least have to hit on a movie that I liked, I wanted to love. The Han Solo movie, right? They tried to pack too much in. It should have been the trilogy. But I still thought it was fun. So, Wayland, how did you wind up feeling about the Han Solo film?
Honestly, I went into that movie with a couple of big strikes against it. As I said, I've been a Star Wars fan since it started, and I've been getting the novels since they've been coming out.
Yep.
Which means I have the original Han Solo trilogy.
So do
back
I.
in the late 70s, early 80s.
From the Scholastic book.
And they gave him a wonderful background in those books and touched on it more throughout the entire expanded universe of novels, which, by the way, is my favorite incarnation of the Star Wars universe, and I'm still pissed at Disney for taking it away. But it very clearly wasn't going to be quite that, so I was already going in with, I'm not sure about this. I thought their Lando was really great. I thought that was well done. Most of the writing was decent, but that just did not seem like it was quite right for Han Solo for me. And since he's another revered character for me personally, I'll go with you. I liked it and I wanted to love it, and I absolutely didn't, for all of those reasons.
Wendy?
Well, I actually enjoyed the film. However, I have not read a lot of the expanded universe the way that Wayland has. And so I went in without any expectations except what I remember from the movies. And from that point of view, since I didn't know he might have had a different background, what was presented to me in the movie was acceptable. I love the Lando actor who brought a younger version of Lando Calrissian to life. Wonderful job. I liked the Wookiee, all of that. And I thought the actor who played Han Solo did a credible job. And I love the explanation of the Kessel Run, too, because that's always been a controversy for decades. And their explanation of why it's called that was very inventive, and it made me smile. So I really don't have anything bad to say about the film. For me, it was a win, and I'm kind of sorry that it didn't continue, because they did have some hints at a sequel that would have been very interesting, and I probably would have enjoyed seeing it.
Yeah, it was supposed to be a trilogy, and oh well.
Yeah.
Jack, how about for you? Oh.
Han Solo is one of my favorite characters. Yeah, I was 7 when the movie came out. When we played Star Wars at recess, I played Han Solo. It was a great character. I went into that movie very worried, and I came out of it very mad. But as time went on, I had to recognize, that character was facing an uphill battle. That actor was facing an uphill battle trying to portray that character. Last year, yeah. Last year, I basically watched everything that was out Star Wars in order. Drove my wife nuts. I thought I was getting divorced. Uh, but I just basically watched everything in order, and of course I rewatched that, and it wasn't as bad the second time around. Was it Time Heals All Wounds? I was less worried about the movie. I'd already seen it. I had seen all its flaws. Now I was able to see some of the stuff that was good, and it was. And the Kessel Run, absolutely, that was great how they basically explained that. Not near as good as it should have been, but not as horrible as I initially thought it was.
Dennis, how about for you?
I enjoyed the movie. I thought the idea that this is somebody who was going to grow into being the swashbuckler that we knew, he wasn't there yet. I thought that was perfect. I enjoyed the story. I thought it was fun. I think they did try to cram a little bit too much into it. And as a writer, the idea that this guy has no last name, so they put Solo as his name, that annoyed me to no end.
Yeah.
That was not one of their better.
Worst part of the movie.
No, that wasn't good. But the twist with Kira at the end, with Maul showing up with his metal legs, that I was thrilled. And I so much wanted the next movie because he could be the big bad. And the whole idea, because Kira goes on to lead what Maul has. So that whole storyline of her with Han Solo being involved would have been such a fun movie. And I'm so sorry we never got it.
So, and Wendy, I'm going to start with you on this one because there's a ton of stuff in this universe we have not even touched upon. We haven't talked books, we haven't talked games, we haven't talked audio dramas. We haven't even covered all of the series. So what's something that about the greater Star Wars universe you think we need to cover before we get out of here?
Oh my! Well, as I mentioned, I'm not really a gamer. I know. Don't hate me. And I haven't really read a lot of the Universal books. I think because I loved Star Wars as a film and it affected me so much as a filmmaker that I have kind of just focused in on that particular format. I didn't really want to sully my vision of what I saw and what the movies made me feel because they were so influential to me. But I really think that perhaps some kind of continuity maybe needs to be in order, and that whoever runs the property, be it Disney or anyone else, needs to acknowledge that the expanded universe has so much great content in it that should have been brought forward into the films, that perhaps that is a direction Star Wars should go for the future, and maybe the fans who grew up on this might be more appreciative. I mean, let's face it, when Luke Skywalker made that appearance in The Mandalorian, this was a moment that made grown men cry around the world because it was such a surprise, and Luke Skywalker was such a hero to a full generation of men that just the sight of him was overwhelming. And the power of that story is something that shouldn't be forgotten, and it's something that should be shepherded with a lot more care.
Jack, how about for you? What's something we haven't touched on?
Well, we haven't touched on the Acolyte.
Yeah.
I touched the third rail.
You whizzed on the third rail, but that's okay.
Yeah. I didn't think it was bad as people said. I think it had a lot of potential. I just think it was slow going there, and I thought Daphne Keane was phenomenal, and I was very mad with what happened with her character. Touching on what Wendy said, you mentioned Kathleen Kennedy. That's a lot of Star Wars fans have a problem with her direction. I would like to see Star Wars having all the ships going in the same direction, because I don't think we have that right now. And I get, and I would have loved if they went with the books. I own a lot of the Star Wars books. But I understand why they didn't touch that. They want to create something new, not something that everyone's read, knows what the ending is. But it kind of seems like there's a lot of behind the scenes infighting, and I think it's reflected in the series. And I just like to see everything going in the same direction. I think that would make a huge difference.
Dennis, how about for you? What's something that you think we need to pile on with?
Well, if we're going to talk about the Acolyte, let's talk about the story missteps that I think. I mean, for me as a writer, I'm always looking to see what's somebody else doing that I don't like. And to me, the big battle where the one Sith kills so many Jedi, it just didn't feel right. And then at the very beginning, when they had this absolutely stellar actress as a Jedi, and they killed her off with some girl with no training, those two things, I think if they had taken her and developed her character and given us more of her, and then she was the one who was cut down in that big battle, I think that would have been much more poignant. It would have been a better use of the class AAA actress. It would have been a better story, because you can believe that one Sith would pull a tricky move and get her in the back. Something vicious like that. But all in all, I wanted to see more. I always want to see more. Yeah.
Wayland?
I will geek out on two different things that haven't been touched on, except like in passing. The Star Wars Expanded Universe novels that I've brought up before. There was such intricate world building that brought things forward a full generation. Kathleen Kennedy started her problems with Star Wars fans by claiming there was no Star Wars source material, which is what pissed off a lot of people. The five of the things, I will rephrase that I will never forgive them for dumping with that universe are Mara Jade, Ben Skywalker, Jason, Jania, and Anakin Solo. Those five characters there were so amazing and had so much potential, and the fact that Disney seems to believe that they just don't need to touch on them is just mind-bogglingly stupid. And then in a completely different direction, because I am a geek, the original Mayfair game, Star Wars D6 role-playing game, was phenomenal, and it captured the feel of the movies like nothing else I've ever seen. And there was this little game mechanic I'm going to geek out on because it was so brilliant. There's this thing called the wild die. You roll your dice, and this one die, if you roll a 6, you keep going, which explains things like Luke Skywalker managing to trash the Death Star and everything. But if you roll a 1, you lose that die, and you lose your next highest die, which explains things like the experienced adventurer Han Solo going, reactor leak, very dangerous, he botched his wild die. Those two things are, to me, such important pieces of the Star Wars mythos.
Well, again, I think this is one of those things that I know for myself, and I know for having talked to y'all. Star Wars is one of those things that has been instrumental, I think, to all of us as storytellers. And so, even the bad stuff, we always try to love and find some fun stuff out of. But before we, all warp out of here, let's make sure, hit the hyperspace lanes. It's been a long day. All right, let's make sure everybody knows where to find you guys, website, social, and of course what they need to be picking up. So Jack, you're up first.
I can be found at jackcullenwrites.com and various social media under Jack Cullen Books.
Dennis?
AutomatedEmpire.com. See, it's right there. AutomatedEmpire.com. All of my books are on Amazon. They're available now on Barnes & Noble or anywhere that you buy ebooks. I also do T-shirts. I do, science fiction. I do inspirational and author motivational T-shirts at shop.automatedempire.com. So,
And he's got some really good ones.
Thank you.
Wayland?
I am some version of Wayland Smith on all of the socials. My website is waylandsmithauthor.com. I do reviews for all of the superhero-based TV shows and movies on a site called comicbookclog.com. I didn't name it. I just work there. And I am very active on Goodreads. I'm one of the few writers I know who has a good presence on there, which is a whole other discussion for some point. And in this year of 25, I'm going to be at a whole bunch of cons up and down the East Coast and beyond. So I hope to see people there.
Wendy?
Anyway, I'm Wendy Van Camp. I am a speculative poet. I am an essayist. And I also am a writing coach. If you'd like to learn more about that, subscribe to my Instagram, which is @NoWastedInk. I also have a free monthly newsletter, which has an article about writing tips, a general ramble of my month, and my poem of the month. And you can find that at nowastedink.substack.com.
And you can find me at jamespnettles.com, authoressentialsworkshops.com, creatingprose.com, and of course here at Continual. And we will see you again soon. I gotta go play with the lightsaber.